Okay, so today we're going to talk about real talk, some serious stuff. What I want to talk about is in 2013, I used to have a car, not this car that I'm in right now, but a car that didn't run and I couldn't afford to fix it. I certainly wasn't going to pay to tow it somewhere and have them tell me it's an amount I can't afford, and then I'd have to pay again to tow it back to my house. And I couldn't buy a new car. So I had just decided that if I wanted to go somewhere, I was just going to have to walk or take the bus because I didn't want to deal with my car. It was just a time in my life when I just didn't have the money to just be fixing cars. And I'm sure some of you can relate to that. So as time went on, I just left the car sitting in the parking lot of the apartments I lived at. And there was an older gentleman, much older, I'm assuming living on Social Security. And he had asked me a few times what's going on with my car. And I said, well, it doesn't run. I can't afford to fix it right now. And, where I was living at the time, I did talk to my neighbors. And I know a lot of times in today's society, you don't really talk to your neighbors or get to know them very well. Well, this man had eventually told me that I don't know if it was that he was falling on hard times or that his lease was up and they were going to raise the rent or whatever the situation was, but he said that he was coming into a situation to where that I guess the apartments that we lived in were going to throw him out, evict him, or he couldn't afford the rent or whatever the situation was. And so, he was just telling me he didn't know what he was going to do, that he was looking into, trying to find a shelter or, I'm sure he had family, but they didn't live in the area. He would have to find a way to travel to move all his stuff to go stay with family. So over time, it eventually came down to him asking, like, hey, you're not doing anything with that car. Do you mind if I just sleep in your car for a few nights until I get things straightened out? And I mean, I didn't say no because I thought, I'm not doing anything with the car anyways. It's just going to sit there, whether he's sleeping in it or not. And it's not like anyone can steal the car because they can't get in it and drive away because it doesn't run. So I said, sure, I'll just leave it unlocked and, you can sleep in it whenever you need to. And, and I just went about my life. Now, of course, this is a time when myself would start to think of, what if that was me? What if that happened and I had nowhere to go? I'd have to sleep in my car. Because at the time, I had an apartment, I had a job, and even though I couldn't afford big expenses like car repair, I still could eat. I still could pay my rent, pay my electric bill, pay my cell phone, that sort of thing. But, there's a lot of us that we get in a situation where, what if you lose your job? Sure, there's unemployment, but, sometimes that doesn't kick in right away. So what if you can't find a new job? What if unemployment doesn't cover enough expenses to pay all your bills? What if you have a family to take care of? And so then you start going through these things in your mind, or at least I did, of what would happen if I lost my job, I didn't have any money, and not even like a job situation, but what if there was something catastrophic that happened, like a flood or a fire or a hurricane or an earthquake, or something happened to where you're put out of your home. And so that's when I started to think, well, for one, if I didn't have a home, at least I have a car, but then I would think, well, my car doesn't even run, so I need to probably get myself in a situation to where I could get that car running, because we always have to have a plan B, but nowadays you need a plan C, a plan D, a plan E. And so that, okay, everything's going great, but what if something happens and things aren't going great and then I don't have a place to live anymore? Well, at least I got the car. So then it's like, okay, well then I got to get the car running, and I've got to at least work towards that being my next goal, of at least finding out how much it's going to fix the car, get it up and running. And so that, at the time I wasn't thinking, yeah, I'm going to end up living in my car, but having some backup plan. So obviously what did happening down the road was I did end up living in a car by choice, But I do think that it puts that thought in your mind of what is my backup plan. And hopefully that some of you, maybe you have family or friends that if something terrible happened, you could of course always count on them. Or like I said, if something happened to where, yeah, okay, say there's a fire, okay, then people say, oh, don't worry about it because you have insurance. Well, I feel like sometimes insurance doesn't just instantly kick in. I mean, I'm sure they don't just pay you cash on the spot when you're standing outside your house that just burned down. So I'm assuming there's probably some transition time of when you need to go stay at a hotel, or you need to go stay with family, or you need somewhere to whatever stuff you were able to salvage to put that in storage until you actually find a new permanent place to live. So as much as I'm not trying to think of worst case scenario, it is always good to plan ahead of what will your plan B be in case something does go wrong. And of course, I'm referring to does go wrong, meaning say you had nowhere to live. Eventually, you will have a place to live, hopefully, but there's kind of always that in between time. What is your plan B? What are you planning on doing about it? Do you have any money saved up? Do you have friends and family you can call upon? You know, I think that a lot of things happened in the year 2020 that made a lot of us have to consider what our options are. A lot of people lost their jobs or were at least put out of work for a temporary period of time. And a lot of people had to make choices about what are they going to do in a situation where, even at the time, say you could afford to eat, but say you go to your local store and all the shelves were empty and there was no food on the shelves. So I'm not trying to like put panic into anyone, but I think that some of us have already been through this. If you live in an area where they have hurricanes, a lot of times they'll send out notices to the community to say, hey, you need to stock up on some water, you need to stock up on supplies, because once this hurricane hits, you know, stores are going to shut down and you're not going to have access to just go to a restaurant to get something to eat. So they do try to prepare people, but sometimes it's just the whole thing of in life, it's always good to prepare, think ahead, and even though everything is going all good for you now, it's always good to have a backup plan for the just in case happens. So that's kind of what happened to me when I mentioned, so that in 2013, when that happened with the gentleman that was staying in my car, I knew that eventually that once I got my car fixed, and of course I'd need money to get it fixed, and I would need to also tell the gentleman that he could no longer sleep in my car. You know, sometimes you just got to get the ball rolling, get things in motion, and hopefully you enjoyed this short little story time of mine, and I will be explaining a little more about stuff that has happened in my life. Thank you for listening.